Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Star Citizen Live Radar and Scanning Q&A. I'm your host, Jared Huckabee. And if you've never seen Star Citizen Live before, somebody has. And every show's somebody's first show. This is where we take about an hour out of the end of our week and we chat with some of our developers about a topic that's usually currently in development. Now, if you watched last night's semi-late, kind of very late episode of Inside Star Citizen, we introduced some of the changes that are upcoming to the radar scanning and ping systems. We thought we'd follow that up today with a more in-depth conversation with two members of our vehicle tech team. So let's introduce them now. We've got Tracy and Mark Abent. How you guys doing?
Pretty good. Got coffee, ready to roll.
Every show is somebody's first show. I know you guys have been on these things forever and ever and ever, but let's take a minute, introduce yourselves, tell people who you are, what you do for Star Citizen. Mark, we'll start with you.
Sure. I'm Mark Abent. I'm one of the lead gameplay programmers at the LA studio, and I primarily focus on ship technology and ship gameplay stuff. I work on ships, nothing but ships, and all the ships.
And do you still bug smash?
I bug smash all day, every day.
All
I
right.
just don't do it with videos anymore.
It took a
But
long.
in my head, I'm playing it.
Like when you work, do you still do the narration just to yourself while you work?
Yeah, sometimes I do it in meetings, and Sean has to tell me to be quiet.
Sean,
That never happens.
Sean, who tells Mark Abent to be quiet? Who are you, and what else do you do?
Right. So Sean Tracy, I'm the tech director of content at Cloud Imperium Games. Fancy title that really just covers three different jobs. One of the big ones, and the reason I'm here is directing alongside John Crew, Rich Tyra, the vehicle and actor pillars. So that's where vehicle tech team is part of, and because it's over in the LA time zone, I'm pretty one-to-one with Mark day to day as we go. Then on top of that is the tech art and tech animation directorship as a department, and then is the game direction for Theaters War, Arena Commander, and all that kind of stuff.
So just a couple things.
And just a few.
A few.
All right. So today's show is about radar and scanning. Again, we had a short little primer in ISC yesterday. If you haven't seen it, be sure to check that out. We're going to cover a little bit about what we discussed yesterday and then go into more detail. Let's start things off with a basic explanation for folks here. What is radar, ping, scanning? What do they do? How are they different from another? Why do we need all three? Help us to understand what it is that we're talking about today.
Sure. Sean, did you want me to get this, or you got it?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
You're great.
Cool. So radar, ping, and scan are kind of like bundled together, but they're kind of different concepts. We think of radar as what you currently see within your range of it's your passive contacts. You're flying around and you see a ship, or you're flying around and you see a station, and there's information you see. It's appearing. You see the UI indicating that the thing's there. Whereas ping is more of, I can't see something, I'll ping out and maybe uncover stuff. Now, that could either be something's very, very far away, or something's heavily influenced by an ambient signature, so you can't quite see it without a little bit of help. The only downside of doing that kind of burst to kind of see more is you kind of reveal that you have done it. So if I were to ping out and go find Sean would know that I pinged, but now I can maybe see Sean. And then scanning is more of, what information could I get about that contact? So a common flow is, I could ping out, I find some like little blobs, and maybe I could scan it and cover that. Oh, there's something interesting that I want to go into that blob. So I get closer and it appears as a contact, and maybe multiple contacts, and I could scan those to get other information. So it's a way of expressing in the world what's happening, and maybe show some interest that may want the player to go toward that direction or avoid that direction.
All right. Now, the vehicle tech team works on like these core features, these broad scopes, these sets of tools that then other designers and stuff will go in and then choose from, pick from, play from when they're developing their ships. I bring this up because, as usual, we put a thread up on Spectrum where we collect questions ahead of time, and we'll be collecting questions from the live chat here today. Questions about specific ships are generally the purview of ship designers and the specific ship teams. You guys create the radar and scanning toolbox that they then pick from, choose from, and they choose this ship is going to be this good at this, or this ship is going to be this bad at this. So questions about specific vehicles or spacecraft is basically not the domain of your team. So I wanted to get that out there because there were a lot of questions
That's
about,
correct.
Will this ship do this, and will this ship do that?
We can make all the answers you want. They just won't be accurate. So you nailed it there. And, a little detail within there, too, is that, the vehicle tech team wasn't always the vehicle tech team. That only really happened last year. Last year or so. And actually, scanning and radar was one of the last features, and it gets developed like a feature, and this is just something internal production wise that we deal with. Now the intention of the vehicle tech team is that yes, it's exactly as you described, which is we're working on systems, rolling out systems to content teams, design teams, whatever that is, but this one so happens to be an all-encompassing feature. It's not about marking up every single one of the ships or marking up the entirety of the levels or the space stations or however else. It is still about bringing the system, but it is one of the last anyways. We would call it like a tier one feature, like a tier one team running it through like a feature team, just because it is a lot of work when it is, because Mark has to not only be a lead programmer, he has to be a product owner at the same time. He's got to chase around a whole bunch of different teams. So that's just the evolution of vehicle tech team.
And not to despair, while today's show is about all ship scanning and all ship radar in general, we do have a show specifically about the ships themselves coming up as part of Fleet Week, and that's just in like 2 or 3 weeks. I'm not a calendar, so it's coming up soon. So save your questions about specific ships. We got that show coming in a couple of weeks, but this show is all about the broad existence of radar and scanning, what our plans are for the future. So let's go straight to the thread here. We allowed people to submit questions and then vote up which ones they wanted to see answered most. There's been a lot of talk about how we're unifying the radar, the scanning, some aspects of it between ships and FPS. When we are on foot, will we get the radar data from our nearby ships pushed to our individual FPS HUDs?
So that's probably a two-parter question. First part, I'm just going to iterate more on the radar technology. So when VTT took this on, we did have a lot of radar and scanning functionality, and even ping, but it was a lot of systems that kind of built up from different designers and different features. And when we took this on, we wanted to unify it across the entire game so that it could be used anywhere by any designer to facilitate different, those original mechanics. Passive, it's on your radar. Ping, you go out and find it, and scan, you get information. Whether that's a mission, whether that's on foot, or whether that's on a spaceship, or even on both. So because of that, Star Citizen, you are not just a spaceship, you are a person, and you are a group of people. And in the document for our radar scanning, we do facilitate how and why we want to share information. Now, the technology to do that is there, but it's not available yet for this current iteration. The primary focus is for this upcoming patch will be for ships, because we're going to iterate on developing this tech, basically replace the old system with the new one, and then add on extra features throughout patches. So this tech will allow us to put it on to other things like players and on ships, but the current one will not be exposed to players until an up-and-coming patch. And one of those primary things is, how do we get that information from a player on foot to a ship or vice versa? Now, going back to radar, ping, and scan, radar, again, is what's on your, what's near you and what information we could perceive as the person playing. Now, if I'm on a ship, I'm actually going to see different signatures, even different contacts, because it's based on the ship radar. If I have a small little radar, I might see certain, like I'll go with the prospector. It's made for finding mining things. So if I get on foot, my FPS radar might, depending upon my customized loadout, might see different things what my ship was seeing. So it also depends on what the player has his loadouts on both the ship and on foot are that determine what he sees from his radar and ping. Now, if you do line up both of them, then you'll probably see similar information. But again, your ship is going to have a much more powerful system than one that's on foot. Your ship might be able to see something far away on the planet, but you go on foot, you're not going to see it. I mean, unless you have some nuclear power plant, I don't think your radar will be able to see things so that far away. Now, your scan information, that is something we're looking at on how to send that information to and from the player, because that is something you can transfer reliably, because your scanner is meant to just, technically you could have different things determine what your, if I have a medical scanner and I have a mining scanner, they'll uncover different things, but where we store it is something that the player could look at any point in time once we unlock that information through a UI. So radar-wise, it depends on your loadout. Scanning-wise, depends on your loadout. But what information you uncover from your scanner in a later upcoming patch, you'll be able to access that either on foot or on the ground. Hopefully that answers that question in a bigger way.
Yeah, there's and one other point to it, and it's a little higher level. It's just when we reinvigorated the tasks around scanning and getting that wrapped up and completely done, as well as squadron requirements. One of the big parts, and again, one of the big benefits to be able to direct the two different pillars, the vehicle and the actors, is that we got to design this together. So what we didn't want was a whole separate FPS radar system that just has no no ability to crosstalk with what happens in the ship scanning, because ultimately we're both and we should be able to transition the data between both. So it was a nice thing to be able to design this together, and it just so happens that the ship stuff was obviously a little further along in terms of the amount of time that's been spent on it over the years. So we were able to get that done first, and then we wait for the FPS and everything coming up behind it.
Yeah. We've been talking in general, almost since the beginning of Star Citizen's development, about this notion of when you're exploring, when you're out in the great unknown and you're scanning and you're looking to discover things like jump points or wrecks or anything else that can be found. The idea that you can save that data and then transmit it to somebody else, probably for a healthy amount of credits. Is that still on the table? Is that still our intention?
That is 100% on the table and still our intention, but that's not something you'll see for 3.14.
Now we talked about avoiding the question specifically about this ship, the Terrapin or whatever, but in general, will ships designed specifically for scanning or tracking purposes, and that's anything from a Terrapin to a Hornet tracker to a Carrack or whatever, have more sensitive radars and ping tech available to them?
They can. So a lot of the work that we've done is to talk with designers on what information they would like to have across different ships, even on foot, and what type of upgrade paths you would want radars and scanners to have. And a lot of those type of things usually amounted to different type of signatures, the strengths at which you can see them at, even the strengths of how resistant they are to ambient, even the types. So we've unlocked a lot of information and a lot of ways to categorize information so that the designers could make more stronger radar, more stronger ping, or more stronger scanners, or unlock specific information. We've also incorporated different ways that we could potentially unlock players to filter out that stuff, but it still depends on what the designer said that this particular radar can do, or this particular scanner can do.
Sorry, yeah, to kind of just support that a little bit, is there is now three separate sort of functions of our radar ping scan system that are all able to be balanced independently per ship, per item. But then you've also, in addition to that, you've got those three separate ones. Then you've got three different signature types that, again, you could have a scanner better at detecting CS. You could have a better scanner for EM. You could have a better scanner for IR. So there's a lot of designer control now, and basically gives them a ton of tools to make all the stealth kind of gameplay, or really all the electronic warfare that we've been expecting to have within Star Citizen work as expected and as intended.
And with that, we've been also in talks with different balance teams on what values these things do and how they interfere with each other, so that we could get that electronic warfare, we could get that stealth gameplay. I keep going back to this into different examples. Sean really likes that idea that you have a big ship and you can maybe see it, and you get a little bit closer, and all of a sudden there's a bunch of contacts because that big ship was hiding all the smaller ones. So, an upgrade path could be that you have a radar that's more sensitive to seeing those contacts further out than another one, because its ambient volume, it could pierce through it more than another type of radar. The downside could be more power. Just depends what design wants.
I just want Goose to talk to me. Talk to me, Goose. It's not one pair, it's two pair, right? No, I always found that to be great. But it is such a, it's obvious, but it takes some doing, especially when you've got three different sort of signature types, how you call them, how you actually merge them. And in the end, the challenge is how you balance them all. Is the first time we even took a look at it, what the hammerhead was, had more signature than an Idris. And then, if you were beside the hammerhead, you would never get seen, even at, 10 meters or so. So, yeah.
I was inverted. Will turning off all systems allow us to get close to enemies without being picked up by passive scanning?
It's a good question, because it kind of depends. It really depends. One, on the ship. So what's happening within that ship, even what's inside of it. If it's cargo that's actually emitting IR or whatever, that could cause some problems or whatnot. If it's not shielded, whatever. But it's also considered that there's always cross section. So cross section is almost a visual thing. So if you're getting up to 100 meters from a ship, you obviously see it. And if you can see it, he can probably see you. Now, if you're behind him, different story, right? You're probably not going to get called out, but you may be picked up from CS in terms of your radar. So you are, you're going to want to try to occlude yourself. So if you're approaching to 0 to 100 meters behind asteroids and stuff, yeah, you're going to get right up to him, and he's going to have no idea you're there. But I don't know how you're maneuvering with all your stuff turned off, so yeah. It really depends. But all those tools are there now, and you'll know they're there. It'll be pretty obvious, I think.
We actually have a test level that Kirk Tome was messing with, where there's a kind of like gas cloud that has high EM and IR emittance. So if something flies in there, you're not going to see it. But if you get close enough, if your radar detects cross section, you'll be able to see it. So, it really depends on what the other player's radar is and what your mission is doing to determine what you can see and how.
And of your ship, like,
yes.
When we're talking about cross section, it really is cross section. Like, if you are horizontal to a guy versus being top down, your cross section is way less, like way less.
It is, because it's the shield technology that we're using is based off SDF stuff from physics, and the beauty of that is it gives us a more accurate description of cross-section on the overall surface area. So we're 100% using the physical representation of that ship. So if you have one that transforms in different ways or even animates, you're going to get different cross-section. So like on the hammerhead, if you look at it like horizontally, the cross-section is a lot smaller than if you flipped it upside down.
Then it's loud. Yeah.
Then it's super loud.
But a Gladius, being a good, decent fighter, like that coming at you nose first, it has a very small cross section, so you may not pick it up. That's why the question is like, it really depends. But that's what's so cool about it. That's again, that's the system we wanted to bring in here.
That's why we make everything systemic.
With that depends, we also wanted to add some stuff onto the UI to kind of help you with that. So one of the things on there is what your signatures are emitting versus the ambient levels that are happening. So it kind of gives you an idea of how well seen you are versus what's happening in the environment.
The best way I describe it is like a thief visibility meter.
Yeah.
Thief or siphon filter. Maybe that's really old. Yeah, it's got a little visibility. So you've got that ambient level. So like a good example, and this is more for FPS because they have the dB signature, so like sound. But if you're in a room that has a generator running, it's super loud or whatever, that ambient sound is going to be like full bar. And as you run, your ambient's going to move up and down like this as it is, but it's probably staying below. So that means you're stealth. You're not detectable easily, anyways, or passively from somebody else's radar. But could they focus scan you? Could they ping you? Yeah, they could still do all that kind of stuff. But
Mark, you mentioned UI. I wanted to throw out some notice. For folks who have already seen the segment that aired yesterday, the UI is not finished. It's still in progress. Everything that we show in ISE is still a work in progress. If we waited for everything to be final art, you'd have one episode the week before a patch went live, and that's all you'd ever get. So always keep in mind that when you watch something on ISE, especially when it's earlier in the quarter, that you're looking at a very, very work in progress thing.
And it's an interesting thing with the UI is that UI that we actually shown in that video for the scanner and the ping is actually not the ship UI. We have a whole new spectrum of ship UI that we want to do for scanning and radar that we just not ready to deliver yet. So we're actually utilizing the FPS scanning UI. So you actually get a glimpse of what's to come in our ships now.
Tell your friends, amuse your enemies. Everything in ISC is very work in progress. All right. As a follow-up question from the chat, we talked about, we're still intending to make the data collected through scanners and stuff, shareable with other vehicles. Have we started working on how, like that system, like how that's actually going to be? Are we talking like physical data chips? Is it
like
what are we thinking?
I think we got to beat to death the design of that, and I know Tony very specifically is very, very keen to talk through that and to work that design out. So I wouldn't say much there. In terms of the system, though, yeah, definitely. The system itself, we've got basically a data bank of objects that can be stored, because short of selling it as an item or giving it to other players or whatnot, we've also got to do a couple other things even before that will lend itself to it. So like the first one is being able to share contacts and all that kind of stuff within your ship to just other people in your ship, like a gunner or something like that. So number one, we got to do that. Number two, we got to be able to share stuff to party. Like if you got a friend in the party, you got whatever. We want to make sure that we're kind of going the direction, and to use a sort of a battlefield term, they called it squad sight. But it's basically like, everybody in the same squad can kind of see the same stuff. They're sharing radar targets, and how the system kind of deals with that, because, you may be good at detecting this, but this guy's better at detecting this. I think it's super cool because actually the party can be laid out in such a way that you've got a ship that's really, really good at scanning CS. You've got another one that's better at IM. There's another one that's good at EM. And then there's another one that's actually, the loudest signature in your group. So it's actually clouding, the rest of you guys being stealth together. So I love that there's that dynamic, but we've got to get there. Yeah. And then once we've got that, cool. Then we'll package that up and put it in a shop, and maybe we do something about it. But I'm sure Tony will want to talk through the actual design of that.
Horse before the cart.
Yeah.
Victor Tramp's like, Jared, we know. I'm like, I read the comments. Some people still need to be told. All right, moving on. Will radar or scanning have its own interactive MFD?
Yes. So radar, I know on some of the bigger ships, there's been ideas of having like a radar globe and then being able to interact with what your actual radar is doing. There's different designs on that, but the one that I'm more familiar with is the scanning MFD. We've been going through it. I'll backpedal and say this is not something for 314. This is something that's up and coming. We've been in talks with UI and other teams on what that MFD is going to do and what information should it have. So going back to scanning, you're going to unlock a bunch of information. You're going to if I lock mine or go to a mineable and I find that it has gold, or if I go to Sean's ship and I find that it has a weapon or even gold, that information gets stored in my object data bank on the ship. That MFD's goal is to show you that information. So if I go to scan a ship, I'll get the nice UI and I'll see all the information there. But if Sean's gone, I can't look at that information again, hence the MFD. The MFD is supposed to be that window of memory of what I scanned in the past. So the good news is in the object data bank, we have that whole underlying system where we actually save that information there. We just don't have a way for the player to uncover it. The only way you could uncover it if Sean comes back and you try to rescan him, then we show all the information that was there. So the scan UI is going to be that housing of, I scanned a bunch of things. Maybe I could look at what was there in history and even maybe have a way of transferring it somehow. Because that's going to be the ultimate thing is, what do I do with it? Do I bring it with me on foot? Do I transfer it to another party, or do I sell it? Or can someone, I think Calix had the idea of another designer on VTT. He wants to steal it. I could go and scan it, sneak aboard my ship and steal it. So why not? It's on the ship. We just have to have ways of accessing it. Okay. There's a ton of ideas that we want to have fun with.
Okay. There's a couple of the questions in the chat is about wanting the co-pilot or another seat in a multi-crew ship be able to do the scanning and stuff like that. And that just comes down to operator modes, right?
Yes and no. So each of the seats, as of right now, they have their own operator self-context. So if I'm piloting, I could be flying, and if some guy's in the back with a scanner on his turret, he could be in the scan mode. Now, if he scans something, it gets saved into the ship's databank. And what's cool about that is if maybe me and Sean are in a cutlass, he's scanning someone and I'm in combat shooting and flying, whatever information he unlocks, I'll see it too. And this is there in 314. Like everyone in the same ship, in the same seats, the scan information is shared across the entire ship. So it's you could have buddies that just scan everything and everything. Go for it.
Right. It's all about making sure that information gets to everybody else that's on the ship.
Yes.
It's like that.
A lot of information to send and receive to different people.
And folks will be learning more about operator modes and how that affects multi-crew next week on ISC. Can we please have the functionality to choose or filter what we actually scan for?
Good news.
Good news. Good news.
So scanner-wise, that's still in a discussion of how much the players can actually have control over. But design-wise, designed to set up to be medical information or law information, and that determines what you unlock. There's still discussion on what to allow players to filter out in that scan mode. Radar, we actually did a lot of back-end fundamental stuff to allow players. Now, there's no UI, so you won't be able to access this 314, but the foundation, because remember, vehicle tech, we build the foundation of stuff, is there. And we have a way for players to turn on and off certain signatures, even turn off certain contact types. One of the discussions we've had and seen across the community too is they want to be able to turn off certain contact types because you get the Port All-Star and there's like 1 billion turrets. Well, why not allow you to turn it off or have it off by default and then you could turn it on? So behind the scenes, designers set up what kind of contacts you can see, and the player can then opt in on which ones he wants to have. We just need to have a UI to expose that information. Maybe that could be the radar MFD. It really depends how in depth we want to get it, but the functionality behind the scenes, again, is there.
It's a common refrain. The UI is one of the only, one of the few departments that touch every single aspect of the game. So they're always in incredibly high demand.
Well, they're very vital because they,
every
they
aspect of the
game
requires UI.
Oh yeah, everything.
Are you going to change the awful cube scanning visual and mechanic?
I like the cube.
So good news, right? Go ahead, Mark.
Good news is we actually had the graphics and VFX teams help out concept new ideas of how we want to have this blob. So we did get rid of the box. I'm sorry, the box is gone. And it got replaced with more of fuzziness, that there's some object within there. Because the whole idea of ping is that we don't know what's there or where all of it is. It's more of a general area. There's something here or a bunch of things here, and you don't know what it is. It requires you to either focus more ping so you can reveal context or get closer. But the idea is just, there's something there. So the the VFX all got changed. Now we wanted to move the VFX to be more on the player's lens to indicate that it's more of a system that's happening and relaying the information to you on the 2D, because it's not a 3D in a world effect that happens. But the old effect was kind of 3D. Now, we didn't quite get all of that there because there's some stuff we want to do with the player ping and radar. So we kind of have a hybrid right now where it's still in the 3D world, but it looks like what we're going towards with that on-lens VFX. So we did get rid of the box. It is still in the 3D, but we want to move it more into the 2D so it overlays on top of things. One of the complaints we've always seen too is you ping out and you can't see the box because the mountains blocked it. Well, we want to get rid of that so that it's mostly on the UI. So you go, okay, there's something there. You just have to fly towards it. So we're getting there and we're improving the effects. And as Jared said earlier, this is not final. We're continuing to develop the VFX. So when you guys see it, please put in your comments because I'm sure we will take your feedback and make modifications as it goes. But for 3.14, it's a hybrid to get us where we want to go.
Yeah, and like what you'll see, and Mark described it really is depending on the distance, depending on the signal of the thing, it'll be wider or more narrow. It's meant to be rezzing in. That's kind of the thing. There's something there. You just don't know what it is. You don't even know how it's shaped. You have a blob of a bunch of different meshes that it looks like, and the closer you get, the more it resolves, and then the closer you get to that, you actually get a contact. And so basically, if you're coming into a system and you're willing to kind of give away your position, because if you hit ping, that pretty much is going to notify everybody that gets hit by the ping that they've been hit by a ping. So it's like walking into a room and going hello, and then somebody way off in the side goes hello, and you're like, okay, they're over there. But that's the whole idea with this, is that there's this broad phase ping, then you have passive radar. As you get closer, you've resolved to contact, then you scan to get the info. That is the loop.
I'm going to send those 2 WAV files to Phil Pierce Smallwood and see if he can't replace the audio that the pings make with that.
Excellent.
Please do.
At least in game dev. We talked a lot about ship radar and scanning because that's what's coming with 3.14. FPS radar and stuff will follow shortly after. Will FPS radar be able to discover harvestables, minables? What will it be able to discover? What can you tell us?
That pretty much goes back to, what the designers want to set up different scanners and radars to be. I have a feeling we're going to, when you first get the system up and running, you kind of want to expose everything. And then you want to decrease it down and make different variants to indicate different upgrade paths. So that's kind of what we're doing for the ships right now. So all the ships are going to have basically the similar radar and scanning, and then different ones will get exposed and broken out to be stronger and more flexible on what they can do, because now the system allows it. So I imagine the same thing's going to happen with FPS. Now, FPS doesn't have as many variations as ships are. There's dozens of ships, and they each have different roles and goals. So they're going to have a lot more complex items that determine how you scan radar. Whereas an FPS one, we might have a few dozen, and then over time, more of them come out. So the initial ones will probably allow you to do the same gameplay loop now, whereas you can scan mineable rocks and you could ping them out and find them. And then I'm sure there will be upgrade paths that the mining team or even FPS team will decide to branch out and or restrict other ones to focus more on a goal. Because I mean, you can make a scanner or radar more focused on bounty hunting versus mining. Having one to do both is more of a gateway to make the branching paths work.
Yeah. And to expand a tiny bit on the harvestables, the minables. The whole intention with this system, and a big part of the changes and why it took as long as it did, was it needed to be designer friendly enough that it was an arbitrary component that we can add to any entity. So like if we want to just make a box, have a crazy EM, IR, DB, whatever, we just set it on the entity. It's all very straightforward as far as a designer is concerned. Sorry, you hear my cat?
Yes, you definitely hear the cat.
Yeah, she wants to do scanning. So we could just add these components on these arbitrary ones, and it's all up to us what that signature is and how strong that is and what entities get them. So it's nice because, again, for Squadron and things like this, you can have mission components or mission entities can have these. You can add them to pretty much anything.
I want you to know you had a wonderful opportunity for a cat scan joke, and you didn't take it. And
oh, I missed it.
and I will be bringing that up at your annual review.
Yeah, fair enough.
To go on more with what Sean was describing, in the past that we had that Xeno event, we had a little bit of radar scanning. It was mostly trying to hook it up to an existing system that didn't quite support it, and the designers got really far. But the new system will be a lot more flexible. So if we were to go down that path again, they could relay more information and unlock the mission better based on what information you get and how quickly you get based on your radar or your scanner that you have. So the designers now have a lot more open-endedness of what information they want to give to players. And especially once we have more branching paths, that determines what information you get. So it's cool because if you have a medical scanner, maybe if you scan this thing for a mission, you're going to uncover a different path than if someone has a bounty hunter scanner. Now, these aren't real scanners right now, but it's the idea of what design can do with them for their missions is exciting.
Okay. Will scanning ever be skill or knowledge based rather than just holding a button?
Yes and no. So we've gone through different ideas of what it means to be a skill-based. And there's some ideas to get it to there. But what we wanted to focus on is, again, getting it to working where everyone knows how it works. And once we get to that level, then we can maybe add extra things that make a skillful player unlock information better. I don't know what that means yet because it's still ongoing discussions of what and how we can make it more skill-based. But one of the things that we're bringing into it to kind of bring that gameplay into there is scanning is now tied to the signatures and the detection of an object. So if you have a ship far away that's like on the edge on your radar and you scan it, you may not get all the information about that object unless you get closer, just because the emissions that it's making is off the edge that you can't quite see it really good. So you could see Sean you can see his ship, but maybe you can't see his contents, and you have to sneak up on him to make your signatures not too far out, so you could scan him to see if he has anything better. So there is a bit of emergent gameplay that comes out of there, but the whole process itself, skill-based, is still ongoing on what that means and how we could deliver it to a player. Okay. And again, we're focusing on getting the basic system there, and we'll modify it as we go. A lot of it's too is we'll watch what players do and maybe add different things for different skill sets.
Yeah, I think there's still a couple layers in there that do have. There's a bunch of player agency now, and whether or not you want to call that skill or not, it really depends situationally what it is. But they can focus scan on it. They'll know what the interference is according to the signal of the scan target. So again, if you've got a lot of interference, you're going to want to focus more, and that's again a little bit of a skill. You've got to know to do that, and if you don't know to do that, you're going to take that much longer to scan. So that's just speaking of the scanning independently, but like just again, the whole electronic warfare suite, there's plenty of skill involved. And a lot of it has to do with just situational awareness and knowing yourself, right? Checking the ambient levels. Am I stealth? Am I not stealth? Has somebody pinged me? Have I pinged somebody else? Do they know where I am? All those sort of layers of it is the little cat and mouse kind of gameplay that I think we want out of this.
And the skill, I guess, out of that too is, if you design your ship to be less emission based and you're aware of how well those emissions can go, determines how well you could sneak up on someone and scan them to relay that information back, or just go all hands on board and try to take over that ship. But if you have a ship like a Hammerhead that's emitting something crazy, you're not going to be able to sneak up on someone because you're just loud.
Not with that attitude.
But it's what Chris likes about all of this, right? It's all about preparedness to go to the thing that you're going to go do, and then adapting in the situation. But it is the forward thinking and a bit the agency that you have to make those decisions on the way in.
We talked earlier in the show, Mark, about Kirk and his test level with the gas cloud that has all the EM interference and stuff like that. Do we know? I realize this is a question for the environment team and not for you, but I'm going to ask because folks in chat are asking. Do we have an idea of when that stuff might actually make it into the persistent universe? Jump from a test level to the real deal?
Hopefully soon, TM. So now ambient has a direct there's two different types of ambience. So there's ambience that a bigger ship infers onto a smaller ship, or something bigger emissions infers onto a smaller emissions, and that will never 100% bleed out the emissions. It's more of a modifier so that you could, even if you're really up close to it, you'll eventually see it. And then there's more of an environment ambient, where this one is you have to be above it in order to see the object. So in order to know what those values that we need are, we need to have reasonable signature generation across the board. And the first pass of that is going to be working with VET on what emissions should we be seeing so that we could get reasonable ranges for ping, for radar passives, and also for scanning. Once you're there, then we could take those values and plug them into the environment so that you could have more stealthier areas, like an asteroid field could completely hide CS and you're completely loud with EM and IR. But we have to be careful what those values are because we want them at a range that makes it harder to see and not completely blind players. So we will have some areas that emit ambient because we're going to toy with values to get it there. And once we have a baseline of how we want this stuff to get, we're just going to keep pushing more and more until eventually more systems have it, and then ambience everywhere.
But 314 wise, we will have ambient level within the PU.
Yes.
So that is not like way far away. That has to come with this, because otherwise the whole ambient signature sort of side of it is kind of moot. So there will be an ambient level plus coming from the ships.
Chad is like, Jared asked a one question. It's my show. I'm the boss. I can do it every once in a while. There's a lot of good information in there. Let's see. Will we be able to scan planets to see what resources are on it, like life forms, percent of oxygen, water, weapons, or weather, for instance, and collect that kind of data before we land on it?
So
can we Star Trek this? Can we Star Trek this, Mark?
Yes, of course. I wish. So one of the big fundamental things that we've done in our tech for the scanning is trying to think of how we could get anything scannable and what and how we could unlock that information. So we built out a system to allow us to create ways of getting information, either through async calls or through immediate data. Like cargo takes a while to get, so when you're scanning it, you may not get it right away because we have to go send it to a server, which sends it to another server, that eventually comes back to you. So having a planet be able to be scannable to tell you that information is achievable, because we have that whole system there, and we could put it in to unlock that information and send it to the player. Now, whether or not we're going to add that is a good question. That's where Vehicle Tech team builds out the technology to allow other teams to use those foundations to add that information. So while it's possible, I can't say, yes, that's something that's going to go there. But I know how kind of the behind the scenes of the planet works, and the resources that are there is something we could obtain. So maybe in the future, that is something we could spot to the players, that, hey, maybe there's a severe weather storm here, or there's cargo, or there's something on the, there's a bunch of gold on this planet somewhere, go find it, and you could ping out. That actually would be kind of cool emergent gameplay. So the system it's flexible. We just have to start adding it in based on what other content teams and feature teams would like it to do.
Okay.
So we should totally tell the mining team, hey, there's this cool idea.
With the somebody play Star Marine. With the introduction of FPS radars, will we also see the removal of God Eye bounty markers for PvP bounties?
It's going to be a question for the PvP bounty guys, I guess. I would assume so, because the whole thing with bounty, part of the gameplay is finding them, right? So it's not super fun if you if you have this this infinitely long and always on screen, go here.
Yeah.
That's pretty straightforward. And I wonder, and I'm sure they're gonna have a bunch of layers. Like if it's a certain bounty level, maybe it starts getting that bad,
Right.
like a GTA 5-star kind of thing. Like okay, everybody in the server, this guy, he's right here. Let's avoid him.
Yeah.
But I don't want to answer on their behalf.
How close you are to the comm relays and the security stations, whether that information is getting relayed or whatnot.
But again, and if you know you have a bounty on you, again, you're going to change the stealth gameplay stuff, right? You're not going to be loud. You're not going to be going into systems pinging and all that kind of stuff. So I would expect as much. But yeah, we have to see as the FPS stuff comes on.
Yep.
Well, I guess that bounty thing is kind of going with how other things go. Is you kind of expose a system with 100% here's everything, and then you start bringing back stuff with different upgrade paths and bring it into other systems. So at the time that was made, radar and scanning couldn't give them that information or a way to do any way of uncovering stuff or going to find where that bounty is. So it's now available. So maybe that is something that could get exposed so that you ping out and maybe you kind of go, okay, he's over here. But again, that's going to be more of the feature team working on that particular, how they want to use radar scanning to do that sort of information.
We'll save that for the next time USPU is on or something.
There we go.
As a follow-up to that, what can you tell us about counter scanning tools, aka jamming?
So radar is based 100% on the signatures and the ambient. And we do have, I was saying, environmental ambience and nearby of another object emitting. But there's also kind of a third one. And this is when a chaff is emitted, it actually generates a volume of ambience. So you can't see in between it, in it, or out of it. So if someone makes a big enough ambient field, that's how chaff blocks out you, like a missile lock, or how you're actually able to see that object. So bringing that emergent gameplay of how we can make, maybe those little bits of ambient fields around is something that actually was talked about. There was a concept of a radar jammer, which literally, if you activate it, just spits out a bunch of ambient fields around you. We did something similar with the interdiction, where you jam and it blocks things from quantum traveling. We could literally do the same thing with radar where you blind stuff around it. It's things that are feasible, but it's again one of those things. Is it something that a ship does? Is it something that a player brings onto the foot? Tech wise, we're there. We will bring it. Design wise, the ship just needs to say this is its purpose, and then we'll start utilizing it. And then the other thing is interference with scanning. So we do have stuff in our design doc that we're going to bring forth through next patches as interfering with scanning, because if you're scanning something and your ship has precious cargo or even stolen stuff, we want you to be able to kind of block that so that there's counter interference, so that if security scans you, you're not going to see the bad goods. But if he has a strong enough radar, he's going to be able to find it. So detection from radar and ping, there's a possibility of a jammer, or the system has a way of doing it. We just have to incorporate that on the feature teams or on ships. And way of interfering with scan is stuff we're going to be introducing through different patches.
Yeah, so Mark pretty much touched on all the active, all the active sort of ECM stuff that we have, which is, the chaff works like an ECM thing, electronic countermeasure. Right now, it just happens to have the exact same signature that we do on a mask, and that's why again you've got IR missiles, you've got EM missiles. This is the whole reason for those, and the same thing will work with radar. But some of the passive stuff, again, like the whole player agency and just being able to set yourself up on the ship side, Mark talked about the interference or the lack, or the stronger your signal is, the less that interference is going to affect you. So basically, if you can remove stuff from your ship or turn off things within the ship that are louder, that is your, effectively a passive countermeasure, or, effectively you're countering whoever else's scanner as best as you can right now. But the ECMs is going to come from chaff, and then further to that, I would hope that from an operator sort of scan position, we can do more. But in the meantime, it's all ambient interference and current signature levels. And the active one is chaff. Like for example, for the tank, I want smoke, right? Then that should get me. Obviously, it should just call out the CS, right? Why would you have a cross section you can't see the tank? So it's things like that.
Why are you shooting? I'm hiding ourselves.
Exactly.
I'm just a particle effect. Leave me alone.
And of course, there are always, as a follow-up to that question, there are always the ships that come with, dedicated scan-resistant cargo compartments and stuff. The Mercury Star Runner, I think the Phoenix,
like shielded cargo.
Exactly. One of the constellations is supposed to have a shielded area, stuff like that. And
it doesn't make you immune to the scan. All it does is it really increases the amount of interference. So it's going to take forever for the guy to actually scan you the whole way.
Yeah. So it's either going to take you longer, or it's for the different levels of scanners and stuff. It might protect you from like the first 3 levels of scan. But if somebody upgrades to scanner 5,
and that's a good note, actually, and it was part of the feature set, and it was part of the criteria that we set up the feature on, was that partial scans give you partial info, and actually depending on the interference there, you're only going to get a certain level of information off the ship. So for example, if there's a ton of interference, you're going to get the fact that it's a ship, maybe the name of the ship, maybe even the pilot, but you're not going to get anything else. You have no idea about the weapons, you have no idea about anything. You're either going to have to get closer, focus your scan, do a whole bunch of stuff to make that happen.
In video games, nothing is absolute. There's something you do, and then there's a counter to that.
That's the idea, and just feeding back to the player. That's what's really important to us, is that people learn and play with the system because they've got feedback and they know what's happening. And this is the big thing that's changed just based on the old scanning. Like we used to have MFDs with little IM and EM. IR graphs, but they weren't even, they were just flat numbers. There was no relative anything. So you knew it went up, but like, you don't know how much that really went up, why that matters. So there was no way to learn what the scanning was doing. So now it's a little more clear and immediately fed back to the player.
I think one of the things I hope for is, is false signature generators, being able to, being able to, fly in something like a Gladius
Spoofing.
Or something, and look like I'm a Idris, just to freak people out.
You want a thumper for outer space?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah. All right, we are nearing the end, folks. let's do a biggie here. Let's talk long range scanning. This has been one of the questions that we've had in the game for a while now. It's with the advent of server meshing, on the horizon and culling out things here and there. Somebody is on one server while I'm on another server and stuff like this. How are we working to prepare ourselves for that, to make sure scanning doesn't have to be completely redone again when that day comes?
Sure. One of the biggest things that we've taken the liberty of doing is trying to get rid of the restriction of distance. So before, the radar would kind of have a flat distance of how far it would see things, and that's it. And when you have your passive radar, basically your regular radar, that is only going to show you the things that are technically streamed in on your machine, because those are the stuff that are active. You could target it, you could shoot it, you could interact with it. Ping is mostly supposed to be the thing that says, hey, there's stuff out here that's maybe further out than your world view. They could be in our immediate release, a few dozen kilometers away, to where we want to go once we get server meshing in that, where there's a few 100,000 kilometers away. And what we're doing with the technology is when you ping out, we've changed the whole system to do an async query, so that once we have the API for server meshing ready, we could query the backend for find things that are of interest to the radar that you have, and then report it to you as a blob or even as a potential contact, depending on how far you are. And since we know what that information was, because it was all information that was just stored off in a data bank, we could uncover it, store some stuff in the blob, so that when you ping out and you see a blob far, far away, you could scan it and go, there's something in here that's of my interest. I could go fly that direction and then proceed with more of the gameplay of pinging, and then eventually it comes on your contact and you can see it. That's where we're heading towards. So the immediate is replacing our existing systems and removing restrictions so that you can see things that are streamed in. And then once we have the server meshing technology there, we'll hook up those hooks so that we could uncover the information that's been streamed out and even across different servers, because it's in the local system, and then relay that to you into either a point that's saying there's an active contact here or a blob, and then you could scan it to uncover whatever information is relevant to the scanner or the objects that are there. So that's where we're heading, and that's what the backend system for the radar scanning is utilizing to move towards, giving players the ability to find things further out.
Cool. All right, gentlemen. Well, that's it. It's 2:00 here local. It's the end of your tour duty this week. I got to let you go because I know you've got meetings and stuff to go to. Mark, Sean, as always, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to be here with us. FPS and ship radar and scanning, everybody. It's been Starson Live. Be sure you check out ISC. Came out yesterday for some more information and an early look at some of the work in progress UI underway. And come back to ISC next week for a look at capacitors and operator modes and missile operator modes and the missile rework and all kinds of stuff that's going to change the future of dogfighting combat. So I'm Jared. That's Sean. That's Mark. We'll see you later, everybody. Take care.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.